Well, hi, everyone. I'm back. Thank you very much for the two panelists and the moderator just now. It was a great session, and I hope you're understanding the logic of our conference. The first is the overall look. The second session was really the system view. And this third section is the view from the communities, from the families, from the students, the grassroots where education is really taking place. So I want to bring on our three very preeminent and highly esteemed colleagues who are joining me on this panel. Okay, so let me thank our panelists and thank all of the participants in the conference for staying with us. This is a session of the view from the ground, where, as they say, the rubber is actually hitting the road. I have three amazing colleagues with me now. So let me introduce them to you so you can also know how amazing they are. Dr. Nene Guevara is the Chief Executive Officer of Synergia Foundation in the Philippines. Prior to becoming a leading figure in education, she held many positions in government, including Undersecretary in the Department of Finance, responsible for revenue generation and tax reforms. Since I worry about revenue generation all the time, I think we have to discuss this, Nene, in greater detail. She has served as an advisor to many international development organizations, including the World Bank and the IMF. Nene's PhD is in public finance, and she has published numerous books on public finance before becoming one of the most well-regarded educators in the Philippines. We also have with us Dr. Rukmini Banerji, who is the CEO of Pratham, one of the world's most respected educational nonprofit organizations. Dr. Banerji returned to India in 1996 to join Pratham in part of their leadership team after working on educational evaluation and research in the United States. She is considered to be a global figure in educational innovation and outreach. Trained as an economist in India, she completed her BA at St. Stephen's College in India. She was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford and earned her PhD at the University of Chicago. And last but not least, we have Dr. Chen Shujun, who also goes by Jason Chen. I hope you don't mind. Jason, we'll go by your English name. He is the head of Tencent's education program and general manager of the online education department. He is responsible for building and overseeing the Tencent classroom. Before joining Tencent in 2014, Jason was also with McKinsey, where he worked in the fields of high tech, telecom, and private equity. He has a PhD in electrical engineering from Imperial College in London. And I have a PhD, which I think means that we're a well-educated group. Hopefully, we'll be able to deliver a thoughtful session over the next 45 minutes, but I know we will. What I've asked each of our panelists to do is describe briefly their organizations, or in Jason's case, their project within Tencent. And since Pratham has a short video, I'm going to start with you, Rukmini, to show us your short video and then describe Pratham.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I was going to actually save the video for later so that you can see it can be connected to what we are doing in the COVID time. But just to give you a very quick overview of what we do in Pratham, we've spent most of the last, I would say 15 years, trying to figure out how to help children acquire basic reading, basic math skills quickly, given that there are many kids who go through our school system, but don't pick up these skills on time. And then that holds them back and they cannot realize the full value of being in school. So we've worked at this for many years. We have an approach that seems to be working quite well in India called teaching at the right level, where we basically work with kids who are grades 3, 4, and 5. And in a period of, a few months, they can be brought up to speed, at least with, basic reading. We also work a lot with children who are much younger because we don't think that this learning problem should happen at all. And if you begin well, build foundations well, then you should be able to leap forward and not spend the rest of your life trying to catch up. And in the building foundations well, we place a big emphasis on families, on parents, particularly mothers, to be able to not just support the kids when they're young, but to be able to scaffold their learning as they grow up. So we do a bunch of other things, but I would say these are the two. The word Pratham means primary or high priority. So that's what we think. Primary education should be the highest priority in the country.
Oh, okay, and Rukmini, just because India is a big country and we want to really impress everyone listening, how many kids do you work with?
So we work in two ways. One is that we work directly where there is a Pratham person interacting with kids or communities or schools. And that we do in roughly about 10,000 villages and communities around India. And that reaches about 1 million kids, I would say, on an annual basis. But we also work a lot in partnership with our state governments, because any idea that we think works when we do it in our own laboratories should be then transplanted or embedded in a larger system. And that number could be in 7, 8, 9 or more million, depending on in which year we are partnering with which size of state government.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And partnering with government is a nice segue to Nene Guevara, so she can explain what Synergia does. I wonder if the camera could please focus in on Nene. There she is, in her kitchen.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. So the poor in the Philippines are those with little or no education at all. 9 out of 10 households in the Philippines are headed by somebody who has not completed even basic education. So the road was very clear for us. Our mission to help people rise from poverty is really to give every Filipino child at least a chance to complete basic education. But we needed scale because we're thinking about millions of children. We also needed to think outside the box because we were in a very centralized system that is controlled by the central government. And we also need to demonstrate results so that we can grow big. So we decided that Synergia will be an enabler, an empowerer. We have to clone ourselves and multiply and to franchise. The second is that we will not work with the central government initially, but we need champions to be allied with us so that we can decentralize the system. And third, we will have to have metrics of performance so that we can prove our success. So we chose our 7 apostles of change, and we applied shock therapy, actually making them angry. And so we were asking, why are your children only able to answer 5 out of 10 questions in the national exam? Why are only 60% of your children graduating? So when we aroused enough anger in them, we know that they share our passion. So from then, we held their hands in order to be participatory because we want our education to be very demand-driven and needs-based. So we helped them, we held their hands in convening education summits where they were really forced for the first time stay to listen to everybody's problems. And then the end of that summit was really a community local education plan. And then we continued holding their hands so that they can put the plan into action, which really meant a lot of capability building. teaching everybody to listen, to work in teams, to generate revenue, to translate goals into action. And to be able to do that, again, we mentor them in training teachers, training parents, organizing school governing councils. So after several years, our 7 apostles have grown into 426 local governments. And we have organized them into a loving network where they share best practices and support each other. And this culminates in a national education summit where we recognize outstanding local governments with the seal of good education governance. So these are so outstanding because they're able to bring the graduation rate to 85%, reduce the number of non-readers by at least 50%. They're able to organize school governing councils. They are able to reinvent the local school board. These are really local institutions where we broaden the membership and broaden their functions so that they can be co-drivers of education reforms and not just relegate this to the Department of Education. So we're very happy. We have produced education mayors and education governors who galvanize and mobilize the community to be able to make education work. Well, of course, we are helped by the fact that we're able to infuse expertise and funds from public-private sector partnership. We were once led by the most eminent business leader in the Philippines, and that helped a lot. So that is Synergia.
Thank you very, very much, Nene. And now, Jason, you are someone who's been thrust into an extraordinary role in the past several months. So maybe you can explain what has happened within Tencent and what you've been able to do to help children continue to learn in China.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ruth. Pleasure to meet all of you online. In Tencent, I lead the business group on online education, where we use Tencent technologies to empower education with technologies, and also use technologies to provide a better equality in education, especially sharing the resources in top tier cities to more tier 3, tier 4 cities in China. In early part of this year, like Ruth mentioned, we went through also a very special period of time where basically the COVID-19 pandemic hit China first, right after Chinese New Year's, where we got a lot of requests from schools, from government, to provide educations online. And this is not just off-school education, but basically provides daily educations from 8:30 a.m. to 6 to 9 p.m. Online for all of the students. We happen just to have such a technology embedded in our companies to build a product called Tencent Classroom, and leverage that to provide such an online learning system that to a lot of schools and a lot of students during this period of time, especially I think first half of 2020.
Okay, great. And I'll start with you, Jason. The next question is, how has COVID affected what you're doing? Now, in your case, it is almost the whole explanation for what you're doing, because what you're doing is a direct response to COVID. But you had some of the tools already in place. So how did Tencent react to the COVID crisis in terms of gearing up and responding to the extraordinary new needs that there were?
Yeah, I think what happened is, not that much planned, to be honest. What happened is I think COVID-19 hit China in pretty much around Chinese New Year, and at that time we got quite a lot of requests from schools to think about whether they can start their spring semester, how they start their spring semester. Do they actually need to start their spring semesters on campus, or they need to actually resort to an online systems? And I think after a couple of weeks of time, we also got more and more requests, not just from schools, but also from city governments on how to actually provide them with the support to provide all the lessons online. Like I mentioned before, we just happen to have such an online classroom technology ready. So we opened basically a platform to all of the teachers in China, where as long as you have a mobile phone number, you can register an account on Tencent Classroom, and then start a live streaming lessons with your students. It could be a small group of students to 4 to 6, or it could be also 50s to 100 students. And sometimes the superintendent or the headmaster of the schools need to give an sort of a semester opening sessions to their 1,000 students. We can also support that. So we basically provide a tool to allow them to start their lessons online. We also run through a lot of challenges, because this is also, honestly speaking, unprecedented. Never happened before in China, where we face pretty much like more than 40 to 50 million students need to come in online on a daily basis, not just for a session, but really for a whole day of session, from morning to the evenings. So we went through a lot of expansions, and our network infrastructures went through quite a lot of challenges. But I think what's good for us is there are challenges, there are turmoils during this period of time. But I think most of this, a lot of schools using our system to be able to restart their basic school educations in February and March.
Well, I have to admit that when I first heard what you've done compared to some of the challenges in the India and Philippines, I think everyone would like Tencent's business to grow throughout Asia anyway, so that everybody can use this extraordinary technology. But let me ask you, Rukmini, one of the key, I suppose, learnings that we're having is that the whole role of the teacher versus the community versus the family is changing in real time. And that has been certainly true in your work. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that like with everyone else, this schools closed suddenly, and we weren't sure for how long. I think at the time when they closed in March, there was a view this would be a few weeks. And so, you were not just that the schools closed, but it was completely sudden, and, for how long was not known. And as a result, I think that at least in India, where we didn't do, in the large part of India, where we didn't do much online with before, there was no chance even to collect phone numbers or other things. So you were really caught unprepared for, connecting in this duration. So what we did is what I think everybody around the world did, is you picked up the phone and started calling everybody you knew. At a family level, you called your aunt that you hadn't called in, so long. And similarly, I think at work, most of our people were very concerned about, how the families were doing, how kids were doing. There was a lot of fear and worry obviously about the disease, but also there was a lot of migration and, disruption of all kinds. And so we established these phone, at least the phone connections. And we realized very quickly that the numbers on which we were calling were very often, you couldn't really send a WhatsApp. If you had to connect, other than talking actually on voice, it would have to be SMS. And so I think that what we learned quickly is that you need to connect. You need to reach out, you need to make sure everyone's okay, and you need to have a two-way communication. So even with SMS, there could have been ways in which you could send bulk. But we found that with kids, if it was coming from somebody they knew, it had greater value. They replied back. And it took us about a month to establish this kind of two-way communication with the people with whom we could reach out. But then we decided that you need to kind of get to as many people as possible. And so what we would do is you would first connect to the village, then you would ask in the village how many hamlets there were or how many neighborhoods. See if you could find a phone number for each hamlet, and then within each hamlet, try to see if you could get to all kids. And I think in that process, what we realized is obviously technology is important, a device or a connection is important. But I've been very impressed with how human trust, faith, connection, warmth can take you quite far. Because people really appreciate that in this time that there was an attempt to reach out. We appreciate that when the kids try to reach out to you. And so I think that one of the enduring features that I hope will carry on will be this two-way connection between people who were otherwise meeting face-to-face, but now are meeting. When we look at our data, Ruth, we are very surprised. There's a lot of more new people have come in. And in many strange ways, we are further away, but we are closer. Mm-hmm. And I think it has just happened because it is a time at which I think people are happy to do extraordinary things, to do extra things. And so I think that has brought a whole community a lot closer. And as I was listening to what Nene was saying, I think that this demand-driven, community-owned, before schools were seen much as the government will provide and we will send our kids. But because that is not able to happen, I think a lot of people are, putting their mind into thinking what to do. I want to just maybe take a little break to show you a video. But before that, what kind of message should go? Because if you can only send an SMS with 60 characters, how do you maximize how to create activities around those? And again, I think a large part of our focus was to engage not just the child, but the whole family. Because like the Philippines in India, we have large numbers of parents who have not had much education, who feel in a way alienated from demanding education. They feel whatever is being given in school is good enough. But here, this is an opportunity to connect at a personal level and to send out activities that brings such people into the fold. So I think that our exercise, I'll show you a little video that will give you a sense of the kind of thing we were doing. I think if someone can just turn, it's a very, very short video, but it'll give you a sense.
Add more 4 5 8 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 ಹಿಂದಿನ ಚಕ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ 36 ಕಡ್ಡಿಗಳಿವೆ.
So the task was to count the spokes on the wheel, measure the diameter, and see the relationships. And I think in something like this, a lot of people got involved because it was something that you could do no matter where you were. And I think that what we've learned is...
you have gone ahead and reinvented the wheel. Good for you. But let me just say, thank you. Can I move on, or do you want to say?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. We can come back, yeah.
Nene, what do you think the biggest challenge has been as a result of COVID-19?
Well, we temporarily lost our gear because all our local governments were really preoccupied in dealing with the health crisis. So we thought that it's going to be important for us to show that we are present and that we're willing to help them. So we organized them into a Viber group. We had regular Zoom meetings for them so that they can share their experiences in fighting the pandemic. And then when they had some time to breathe, we re-energized them to do education again, to support distance.
You're talking about mayors and governors who have many responsibilities on their plate, of which education is only one.
That's right. So when they had time to well, at least a breathing spell, we recreated a demand for them to put a lot of their attention to supporting distance education. So we suggested several activities that they can do. For example, training teachers to do learning modules. So we tried to help teachers to develop content and develop work exercises. We also initiated very interactive parenting seminars. And these are virtually, but we have made them very interactive. So we even play games through Zoom, and then they give advice to each other, and then they help each other. And then this is the time when we realize that actually parenting is a very serious concern, because a lot of our parents are single parents, a lot of them are overseas contract workers. A lot of them would really find it very difficult because they're earning, and at the same time they should serve as teachers. So again, this has opened very inspiring stories, because, for example, those serving as domestic helpers in Hong Kong, uh, people, other parents volunteer to help them, or, for example, open their internet access to the children. Some of our parents just have gadgets for 6 children. So I guess I'm very, very inspired by the cooperative, by the love that their other parents have shared. And also, we're opening a business because a lot of our single parents have online businesses, cooking and selling many other products. So we're trying to open a business where single parent can advertise their products so that we can help them.
Okay, well, that's terrific. Now, Jason, you, when we talked earlier, you talked about how both teachers and parents have really stepped up in interesting ways, but they've also found this transition difficult. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think technical only solve part of the problem. I think what we experiences in supporting the schools providing the lessons online, a lot of challenges actually coming from the teachers. I guess you could imagine, before the pandemic, almost 99% of the education happened on campus, right? So for most of the teachers, if not all of them, public school teachers, they do not have a lot of experiences in providing online lessons. So we run into, and especially during the whole pandemic period when everything locked down, we run into a lot of challenges. For example, right, the teachers do not have, they only have mobile phones at their home. They do not have PCs. And for a lot of, for the teachers to actually deliver the lessons online, like we are here having a seminar, I guess most of us are, facing our PCs, not on just a mobile phone. So they find ways to use their mobile phones to deliver lessons. So especially, for example, for math teachers, they put together a scaffold on their desk. They use, the cameras on the back of the smartphones, projecting on the table so they can write and tell the students on how they do the exercise, and they can flip the phones using the front cameras to talk to the students, right? So they need to be quite technical savvy. They also schools have become also quite flexible. They provide organized seminars to teach their teachers on how to teach online, and they are also young teachers, and there's sort of elderly teachers where the younger teachers are more technically savvy, right? They figure out ways on bringing the class together to be more flexible organizations of doing that. I think we are quite inspired and to see how creative teachers can be during this period of times, and trying their best and trying to use whatever tools they have available to bring lessons to their students and to their kids.
Great. Well, let me just take a moment now and poll the audience on a question. I wonder if I can ask my colleagues to pull up this question. How important are nonprofit organizations in providing educational content and support to schools and children in your community? A, very important, B, somewhat important, and, B, somewhat important, C, not important. Let's give it just a few seconds for people to be able to respond to that. Okay. Okay, so what we can see is that half of the group, slightly more, felt that nonprofits are very important. Almost 40% said somewhat important, and only a small fraction said not important. I thought this might be the case, so I thought that I would give you that good feeling. And also, for those of you who are listening, Tencent is not making any money on these activities helping the school. This is not an income-generating part of their business at this time. So they are, in fact, a nonprofit as well. Is that fair to say, Jason? For the purpose of
That's
this.
fair to say. That's right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you didn't need to know how important you are, any more confirmation, but here it is. The community out there realizes the extraordinary importance of your efforts, and I thank you too. You are really important. Let me go back and ask a question that came up during my conversation with Minister of Education Nadim Makarim, which is talking about how this pandemic has really brought home the need for soft skills like resilience, innovation, thinking out of the box, adaptation, in addition to the traditional skills that schools are supposed to impart. How do you feel about that? Have you also, has it changed your mind about the kinds of education, the skills that young people should be having and what your role is with each of your organizations in bringing that about?
Can I start?
Sure, please, Nene.
Well, Synergia is really emphasizing character education, integrity, love of country, love of community, and higher order thinking skills, because we do not really have very good models in the national government. So their exposure to very bad governance will really create an impact. And I cannot really just quantify the impact on children when they hear corruption and when they hear very bad problems in governance. So that's why we're really saying that we should emphasize character education, love of history, love of country, because this is the time that they should really feel that they should play an important role in helping others and especially helping the poor.
Great.
If I go next, I would say that this, if it wasn't for the worry about the disease and about the economic disruption, I would say if somehow those can be put aside, this has been an incredibly fertile time for learning new things and new ways of operating. If I look at the kids at the ground level, in school, they are put into age, grade, kind of linear pathways. But right now, what they're doing is they're working with or doing things with a multi-age group, which is right around them in their neighborhood. And I think kids are learning a lot as a result of that. A second thing that I think you're learning just because of the context is that resources are very low, but we see children's motivation to do stuff is very high. I think there has been an initial stage at which you felt like you were on a summer vacation, but now you're longing to come back and do structured work. So as you saw from the video, a lot of these videos are actually coming back to us with kids wanting to show you what they've done. And often they're sending it back in 2s and 3s. And so I think that sometimes within the school system, during business as usual, we forget that the motivation to learn often comes from a whole variety of sources. And a lot of it is pegged on the fact that I'm doing it together with my friends and I want to please my teacher. And I think somehow at this time, these things have come to the And I think that in the crisis, this is what has come to the fore. Whether at the government level, local government, national government, village government, or even within neighborhoods, we see a heightened concern about the last person. And I think, again, in a normal business as usual, you kind of take your divides in society as a given. But right now, because of the crisis, you're really worried. What about that family whose dad could not get home? What about my friend who doesn't have a cell phone at home? And I think the challenge for us will be that some of these positive energies that we see, how will we carry them forward when things will move into some kind of a new normal? Organizationally as well, I think when adults around you are having to learn so many new things, the children automatically pick that up. When you see children learn new things, adults pick it up. So it's been a great big melting pot of many things that have happened right now. And my only concern is that I don't think we are learning fast enough from everything that we are seeing around us. So if we give up longing for the good old days of whatever there was before March and look forward to how many of the things that we are cooking up today can go forward, I think that will be a very good investment to do.
Okay, Jason, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think during this special period of time, the pandemic, I think speed up a lot of things where I think technologies get used in educations, both on the student side and also on the teacher side. I think on the student side, parents and students got realize, what online education can do. We do observe, I think, in online learning, distance learning, and there are bigger challenges for the students because the students actually need to be more self-disciplinary, right, to on lessons engagement and also on homework. And there are, less interactions between the students because the students do not have such kind of on-campus environment anymore. But I think that opens another door where students also start to realize, and parents and students also start to realize, what technology can do, what are good for online education, what are probably are some of the pros and cons on online education. That's on one side. On the other side, we also see a lot of schools start to realize, what online education really can do. And I think before that, for governments and for schools, online tutoring is a hot market in China, but it's more for on the commercial side. But in the public school systems, things are lagging behind quite a lot because the schools typically just do, deliver the lessons on campus in physical classrooms. They feel, online education is a little bit distant to them on how to really apply these things to their schools. I think during this period of time, they are, well, to a certain extent, let's say with a quotation mark, forced to deliver all the lessons online. They start to realize what are, the good side, what are also the shortcomings of this. After after the pandemic, in China, things are pretty much eased down quite a bit now. During the autumn festivals, autumn semesters, we see schools start to think about whether they can deliver online lessons for sort of after school lessons, for universities during on cross departments on a lot of occasions. So that's something that we are very happy to see.
That's actually a good segue to my what I think is going to end up being the last question, which is, I think this time has gone by very quickly, but that always happens when you're part of the session. I hope it's gone by quickly for our audience as well. But it's very common in a new administration, a new political administration in any country to say, in the first 100 days, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this on day one, and here is my agenda for the first 100 days. So in a post-pandemic world, when schools open up again, when somehow, I don't think it's going to be as easy as moving from one day to a next day, but when we enter back into being open and being healthy, what's the agenda for the first 100 days? What do you need to do first to get those kids that haven't been able to have this holistic education back on the right track and take all the learning that we've had and help them to overcome this shortfall that they've all experienced? Who wants to go first?
Shall I go first?
Please.
I learned a little bit from watching your previous session where the gentleman from Norway said time is short. So I want to tell you 4 things. So I think I have 4 or 5 sort of key ideas. One is this is going to be the most anticipated, most awaited school opening of all time. And so we should treat it as a celebration and as a celebration of something which heralds that we can now go back to school. So number 1 is celebrate. And I think in the celebration, we must celebrate the role of the parents and of the community in keeping the ship afloat for this period of time. I think the second really important one is connect, or rather reconnect. Kids who have been in different situations, different contexts, they have lost or gained different things. At each at an individual level, I think we need to connect to see where are the kids at, including on have they forgotten how to read, have they forgotten how to do basic arithmetic. I think a third thing is there has to be a very clear goal. A big catch up is needed. Somebody referred to the study from Pakistan. And what he didn't mention in your previous session was that after the Pakistan earthquake, the kids were still behind several years afterwards when they came back, even though economically and health-wise indicators had gone up. And the interesting thing, which our previous speaker may not have mentioned, was not what the closure did. It is what we did to the kids once the schools opened. And so I think that what we do when schools open is really important. I feel you need to reconnect to kids, figure out what level they are at, and create time and space for a big catch up. Don't be in a hurry about bringing the curriculum back in. Create time for a catch up and have very clear goals. We know from the work that we do in India that bringing kids back, we have a large number of kids still in primary school who don't know how to read and don't have good math skills. And once you're 8 or 9, bringing these skills back can be done very quickly. And as a whole society, as a whole community, you need to taste progress once you're back in school.
Great.
So celebrate, connect, catch up, clear goals, and have fun.
Very good. Okay, Jason. First 100 days.
Yeah, I think what Rukmini said is absolutely on the spot. I think if the schools sort of start to reopen for the first 100 days, it's probably get the routines back, celebrate, and I think it's for a lot of students and kids, this is just probably the longest awaited reopening of the schools, right? And I think in China we do observe there are the schools also still need to dealing with a lot of new challenges when the students back in on campus. The COVID-19 worry is not over, right? It's not 100% over even I think in China. So they need to put a lot of rules. So I think as a technology provider during this period of time, I think it's good for the schools just to still be back to normal. And I think afterwards, what we see is there are schools thinking about how to use technologies to help their students. Some students still facing challenges. They especially for universities, there are still some students that are still at home on this. Not in the same city, but the university students need to commute a lot.
But I think Tencent will be there to help.
So they do some of these online.
Tencent will be there to help with overcoming those technological problems.
Yes, and I think afterwards they will start to think about how they can use this. I think that's something we're good to see. But I think for the first 100 days, probably still focusing on campus work is best for them.
Great, thank you so much. Nene, last 2 minutes.
Well, we would like to focus on the kids, on the children, instead of the subject matter. And I would really like to declutter our curriculum and just focus on the basic skills and values that children should learn. Second, we should really institutionalize parenting because they have very, very complicated and different needs. And third, we would really like to have peer mentoring of teachers so that we can strengthen substance and communications, pedagogy, creativity, and inspiration.
Those are great. Well, I'm sorry to rush you through all these answers because they're all fantastic. But we're on a strict timeline, and I just think this just leaves the audience hopefully wanting to hear more. So that's a good way to end. We applaud all your efforts. You guys are doing the hard work on the ground, but really making a difference. You are the true heroes in all of this. So thank you so much for what you do every day and for helping our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much.